Welcome, Bronco Nation, to another part of my Boise State 2022 preview series for the Boise State football team. This is part 3. I've already done part 1, which was the front 7 preview with Carl Kieber. Part 2, which I just put out last week, which was my quarterback passing game preview, which I did with Ryan Dinwiddie. And we've got a former teammate of Ryan Dinwiddie, David Mikell, on here today to help us preview the Boise State running game. This is going to be an amazing video. Hold on to your hats. Can't wait. Got a ton of highlights, both of David Mikell's playing days and of the Boise State football team last season and what fans can expect. We've got a great section we're going to be going through today. I'm going to introduce our special guest here, and then we're going to get into a quick Q&A section, 5-10 minutes, that we're just going to talk about some of that Boise State pass and his experiences there. Then we'll get into a 2021 retrospective, what the team did last year, our over impressions of that season. Then we'll get into a quick preview of some of the newcomers of this Boise State football team. And then we're just going to get into some of the questions surrounding this Boise State run game. I know that, Tim Plow, he's a person that stirs up a little bit of controversy with some Boise State fans. Personally, I have high expectations and hopes for what he's going to be able to do with this team. But the running game is definitely one of those points that brings up a lot of questions of what needs to be fixed, what can fans expect coming into this season for the 2022 team. Then we're going to get into real quick keys to the game for the keys to the season for the Boise State running game, and then a prediction series at the end. So a ton of Boise State related content today, analysis, highlights, everything. It's going to be awesome. Let's get ready to go here. So today we have David Mikell going to be helping us preview the Boise State running backs. He had a great career for Boise State. 2,660 career yards rushing, Boise State, 32 touchdowns. He also put up 488 yards receiving, so a little bit of a dual threat back there, 5 touchdowns in the air, and 2 kick returns for touchdowns, average 25.5 yards kick returning his entire career at Boise State. Now, 2003, that was the year that he got the start for Boise State. Of course, backing up an amazing back in Brock Forsey prior to that, but he got the lone start there in 2003, and he took full advantage of it. 1,142 yards rushing, 13 touchdowns. He also added 122 yards through the air and a touchdown. He has some records here for Boise State. He put up 235 yards versus Idaho. Let's go. Knock him out. 235 yards versus Idaho in 2003. It is still the 5th most yards in a single game for Boise State. He's actually only one of 12 Boise State Broncos in all of Boise State's history, FBS, FCS, junior college, all of it, to rush for over 200 yards. And then his 32 career touchdowns is tied for 9th career total for Boise State running backs. And then his 78-yard run versus Idaho is the 9th longest in Boise State history. It is a pleasure to have you on here, David Mikell. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, man. I saw the first one or the second one with Dinwiddie, and I loved it. And he actually hit me up afterwards and asked if I wanted to join on. I was like, yeah, Blake Meyer's nephew, of course, I'm on there. But thanks for having me on. I love the show that you've done so far, and hopefully this thing blows up and Bronco Nation just keeps on holding on to this and watches it.
Thanks so much. I can't wait to have this discussion. It's going to be a great one. Boise State running game, one that I think fans are maybe a little concerned about. I think maybe we'll be able to help calm some of those concerns today as we look forward to the future. You always get better going forward, and I think that's going to be no different for this Boise State running game. Before we start looking forward to the future, before we get into the Q&A, do you want to talk a little bit about the work that you're doing right now, post-Boise State career?
Yeah. I mean, on top of being a dad, I'm telling you right now, I'm out at my daughter's softball pictures, and we have a tournament today, so I'm wearing my Aces gear. I'm a performance coach, so I work with a lot of athletes around the valley here. I'm still here in Boise. Got a couple kids that are on the team now that coach when I coached at Meridian and Timberline, and that I've trained, and it's so good to see where the program's at. Obviously with Lowe's, Andy there. And that relationship that I have with some of those players and with Andy, and so it's great to see. And I'm still out here. I'm still training, and hopefully I got some more future Broncos coming up.
What kind of impact did Boise State have on building your leadership and your character?
It was a lot, especially coming here at so young. We came right after high school, pretty much graduated high school in June, and me and Dustin Lorente, he was a former Bronco too, we came up in July. And so, you come right from high school and then you're on your own. And it was great to have somebody like Coach Cutter. Coach Cutter, we all know Cutter and love Cutter. But Cutter, man, if you're not one of his players, it's hard to love him because he's hard. He's a hard guy. But, man, he's one of my favorite coaches ever. He demands a lot. and just the coaches that we've had here help you build you as a man on accountability and just how to be in society and how to work with people and how to work with each other. And so what Boise State brought to me and helped me develop as a man, as an adult, I mean, I owe a lot to it.
Well, and Cutter, his son is on the team now, so he's back on the sideline, not in an official capacity, but he's still there. Definitely someone that Andy Avalos can lean on if he needs to get some advice. Again, former coach, I'm sure that he's going to that well. And it's great, like I said, just part of that legacy of former Broncos helping build future Broncos. What was the fan and stadium environment like in your playing days, and how do you think that compares to how it is today?
Oh man, it was, when you go to other stadiums, you play these schools and they have bigger stadiums, but nothing was like, man, how loud it would get in the stadium, especially when the defense on there. I remember my redshirt year and we were playing in the bowl game, the Crucial.com, or it might have been the Humanitarian Bowl then, we were playing Louisville. And I can remember I was just a redshirt on the sideline, but when our defense was out there, I can remember like Brian Johnson, BJ, hyping up the crowd and how loud it got. And it was like 15 degrees and it was loud in there. Just the environment that on game day, I saw in Dinwiddie's interviews talk about it's like a holiday. It really is. It was so great to walk in and you see the tailgate, you see your parents' tailgate, and you're walking through and people were talking to you and you just felt warm and it was a happy feeling to come into a stadium, especially when we played those evening games. I love the evening games, to be able to walk to the tailgate and everybody's been out there all day long. And so just the environment here at Boise State, they love the Broncos here. And I even see now today, I train kids and their parents are talking about how they used to come watch me play. It makes me feel old, but they love their Broncos here. They love they love this place. And just to see the expansion of the stadium coming, I see that little turf club. I forgot what he called it. I'm like, I want to be there. I want to see it right there. And so I love what the future holds for Boise State and that stadium. Hopefully that, then we talked about it too, expand the stadium so we can get more in there, get more people in there and support our team and show up to the games and be loud and be excited about the products on the field.
Do you feel, I know that there's been a little bit of a downward trend in stadium attendance over the last 10 years, and hopefully that's something under Andy Avalos that we can start changing going forward. But have you noticed that? Have you seen that trend going down? What do you think is the number one thing we can do as a fan base to get some excitement in and push towards building more excitement in the program again?
Stop those late night Thursday night games. Yeah. I think, being here, and I understand it, and I tell people all the time, man, this is what builds Boise State. When we play those Friday night games and we play those late games in the middle of the week, that's how you get recruits. That's how you're the only game on. I tell everybody about that Fresno State game. We were the only game on in the world. I think we were on the bus and Swilly's talking about his catches on Times Square, and that's what builds this program. So I understand that, but people do have lives and it's hard to go to the game and get out of there at 1 o'clock in the morning, on a Friday night or Thursday night. But that's part of it when you're building a program. You think about like Florida State and all those other programs where they started and how they had to do it. And so for us to get exposure, for us to get those recruits, we have to take those late games. We have to take those games there in the week. So I understand that, but it is hard for fans. It is.
So it's understanding that kind of in between where you've got to say, all right, we're going to sacrifice maybe a little bit of fan attendance to continue to build the name and the national brand. And then you get to a point where you don't have to do that. So fans, keep sticking with it. Keep putting your money into the program. Keep coming to those games. Eventually, it's going to switch, and we're going to have some of those primetime kickoffs. And we got actually a couple of really nice setups this year. Good Thanksgiving game. That's going to be fun. I think it's kicking off at 10 a.m., and it's going to be a good primetime slot on CBS. So there's going to be some good times coming if we can keep sticking with this program. Well, let's talk a little bit about Andy Avalos here. So your impressions, he former teammate of yours. What kind of impact, what kind of impression did Andy Avalos make on the team in your playing days? And what was your impressions of him getting the head coaching slot?
Oh man, so Avalos, man, that was my boy. He came in. I think he was a year behind us, but he was part of us. So we had like this in our group. Every class has their group. Like Dinwiddie, we came from Sacramento together. We had our group, but Andy actually was a part of our group, and Corey was a part of our group, and that just shows how mature he is. And he shows up, he has his flat bill Angels hat on and his Dickies, and he just hung out with us, and I can remember Andy was like a neighbor of mine. He lived with Corey, they're a neighbor of mine. And I'll just walk over there and we'll just hang out. I actually, went out to Corona one time when I got done playing, and he invited me over to his house. I went over there and ate, hung out with his family and friends. And I remember being on the road, like in Dallas, his dad took a bunch of us out to go eat, and so Andy's always been that guy. He's always inviting you in to be part of something. And he's always been the leader. Andy was a great student. He took pride in everything that he did. And so when the job came open, when Hart's left and they were talking about Kelly and Andy, and I was like, 100% it's Andy. I'm like, well, I mean, I know everybody loves Kellen, but if I'm a parent and I have a son and you're trying to recruit, I want Andy. Andy's the guy that I wanted to send to my son because I know him personally and I know how he develops men and what he demands from men. And we see it. We see it on the sideline. When he's on the sideline, he's excited about his players. He's excited to be there. And so when I saw when he was up for the job, I was like, that's him. That's it. And I know some guys were talking about, the athletic director's not a Boise State guy. We're like, no, but you still you got to pick the right guy in the right situation. And there was nobody better than Andy in my eyes. And I love the fact that he came in. How a lot of coaches that we got before that come in and bring Boise State guys, and what you love to see. But I love the fact that he came in, he did it his way. He didn't bring in a bunch of Boise State guys. He brought in guys that he felt that were part of what he wanted to do, and he stuck strong. And I was grateful for him to do that because he shows that this is his program and this is how he's going to run it. We still have those Boise State values. We're still going to have these guys that are, come in with a chip on their shoulder. But he brought his guys in, and he had to see something new to develop the program. You got to add in new parts. And so that's what he did. He brought in new guys to help build this program to something different. And so Andy's going to do a great job. And I'm not worried about it. And the way that he came in and the way that these boys played, they played hard. And I know for a fact that they love Andy. I talked to some of the players and they love Andy. And so Andy's set his mark on this program, and we'll see success in him.
Well, like you said, he's bringing in new guys that are doing it a little bit different than it has been done at Boise State. And whenever you come in and try to start doing a little bit of not a culture change, because the Boise State culture is still strong. Start trying to make a little bit of a change because Boise State needs that. I mean, we talk about Boise State, great teams, and Boise State's always going to be one of those teams that's in the national discussion, but they haven't been the team that's going to those New Year's Six games lately. They haven't been the team that is challenging for the playoffs like Cincinnati did this season. So there has to be something happen when you start to plateau a little bit. I'm not saying Boise's on a downward trend, but when you start to plateau a little bit, you got to do something different. I think Andy Avalos is doing that. And of course, when you start doing something different, you start trying to bring in different items that you're trying to fit in, mold into what already there, you're going to see a little bit of a bumpy patch. And I think that's what we saw last season. I think that we can start to see things start to improve this coming season. I'm excited for the future here for Andy Avalos. I love you talking about that Boise State culture. This is one of my questions, and that it actually molds perfectly into this right now. How would you describe blue collar work ethic? What does that mean to you when you hear that word?
Means coming in with a chip on your shoulders. Like one thing that we all had a saying when we first came in, a lot of guys came from California. And so when we grow up loving Pac-10 schools. At that time, it was Pac-10 schools. And so a lot of guys that we played against in high school, played with in high school, they would go to Pac-10 schools, and we would be like, we're good enough to play at Pac-10 schools. So we came in with a chip on our shoulders all the time. We came in with a chip on our shoulders. And that blue collar is coming in with a chip on your shoulders and being confident, being ready to play, be ready to win, and being prepared. And that's what it was. We go into a game day and we would know exactly what we were supposed to do. We would know our job. We would know what to do. We would know, then when we come to a line, we would already know if he was going to check or not. That was the thing that, Cutter installed that. I mean, the quarterback's going to make audible, but we should know before he makes audible that he's going to make the audible. And so that's what it is about being blue collar at Boise State, just being prepared, be ready to work, and then be ready to win.
I love that. I love that so much. Talking about being ready to win, you did a lot of that at Boise State. Do you have a favorite moment from your playing days at Boise? Any season, any time, any point, do you have a favorite moment from your playing days at Boise State?
Well, I should say my first touchdown, which was at Arkansas. It was a kick return in Arkansas. But actually, my favorite moment is going to be in 2002 against Fresno State. I want to say it was 2002. Yeah, 2002 in Fresno State, that first quarter. It was one thing that we, in our running back room, me, Brock, Donnie, we talked about, we were going to come in and we were going to set that tone as a running back group. And we said ourselves, we're not going to run out of bounds. We're not going to try to make somebody miss. We're going to try to go over. So we're going to set the tone in the beginning. And so that first, I think maybe the first 3 series, they were all mostly run plays. We ran downhill, we ran over people, we didn't run out of bounds, and we scored. And I want to say Coach Pete told me when he took the job that even up until like his first couple of years, he would still show that first quarter before every Fresno State game that we played. Because it was, if you go back and you look at it, and I've showed some kids before, it really was, if you want to get close to perfect, that was a close to perfect first quarter that we've ever played in that Fresno State game. And that's one of my favorite moments, that because we said that we were going to do something and we did it. And then we did it to perfection pretty much. And so that's one of my favorite moments. That's one of my favorite games, even though it wasn't one of my best games. I didn't have a bad game, but I've had, pretty good games. But that was one of my favorite moments, was that one right there, that first quarter against Fresno State 2002. And then you just took the shell, they were defeated in the first quarter. When you can run the ball on a man like that, on the defense like that, there's nothing. It's like Mike Tyson punch you in the face. It's hard to get up from that. And so that first quarter to set the tone and set the tone for the whole game. And it made it a fun game.
Well, that was a great game for a couple of the reasons, too, because obviously you said setting the tone, having that great first quarter. But then that was also the game that Ryan Dinwiddie came back from his injury there. And he, of course, never looked back, and then led to the future success that he had as well. So I love you picking that moment. That's a great one. I was kind of good at you would say Idaho, because then that would set up this next question. But we'll roll through it. It's all right. 235 yards. People do that. That's
that was a good game. That was a good game. But then what he said, dude, our rival wasn't Idaho. It was Fresno State. Just for the fact that we played a lot of us from California play against guys that were on that team, the new guys on the team, and our family, it was close for our family. All our families would go there. And just the fact that the way that Fresno State just took on, the college football. Remember when they came in with Pat Hill, and he had the guy that was running down, hitting punt returners before they catch the ball, and they were beating teams. And then the David Carr, number 1 pick. So they just set it up for us to be a rivalry. And then, that's when we're playing on a Friday night, like I said, and we're the only game on and ESPN's on, that was it. That was my favorite moment, that we were able to do that in the first quarter and dominate and win the game in the first quarter.
Well, and especially considering that Boise State doesn't really play some of those other traditional rivalries anymore, like Idaho. Fresno State has taken over as that main rivalry, and they're always going to be one of those teams that's at the top of our conference, competing for it. So I think it's a great natural rivalry. But talking about other rivalries, I've asked every player before you so far, so I got to ask you too. Do you wish we still played Idaho? I know you're saying Fresno's the main rival, but do you still wish we played those Idaho teams?
Nah, they got some work to do. They do. They can be rivals with Idaho State. Let that be the rivalry of the state, and let it go on to do other things. So I don't miss that. I mean, I hope the best for Idaho, just because I'm a resident here and I live in the state, and I know kids that are going to school up there. But you got to hold up, you got to do your work. Boise State was at that point where Idaho was, and they did it the right way, and they built, and look where we're at. So Idaho has to do the same thing, and they got to take some chances. Cutter took some chances on some players, and he had success. And so you got to be able to do that at Idaho. Once they get to that, then I'll take it. I mean, even if they are in the FCS, who wouldn't? If Boise State played, was it North Dakota State, wherever, that would be a big game. And so Idaho can still, just because they're at that level, that doesn't mean that they can't build a program to something that's successful. And so we can have that rivalry, and so we can have that game. And so it actually counts for Boise State, because right now it's hard enough for us to try to get in one of those big bowl games. So we can't add another team that's not going to build value to our schedule and build value to a win or a loss.
I love that Q&A section there. I'm talking a little bit about the past, and let's move into, still talking about the past, but talking about the more recent past. Let's talk about that 2021 season, a little bit of our impressions over it overall. I'll give you some statistics to look at that we were talking about for this team last season, and then we'll talk a little bit about what our impressions were for this team. So 2021 retrospective, Boise State not a great year for the running game. I think it got better towards the end, which the statistics will show here, but definitely early on, there was a lot of issues in the run game. You talk about the team overall passing game. Yeah, it wasn't perfect, but there was a little bit of some good stuff throughout the season. But the running game, that is really where Boise State struggled. 124.3 yards per game, which is, besides 2020, which was a COVID year, there's a lot of other exceptions. Besides 2020, that is the lowest average yards per game that Boise State has had since 1996, since their first season in the FBS, when they averaged 119 yards. 15 touchdowns. That is their worst, their lowest amount of total touchdowns, running touchdowns on the year since 1997, when they had 14 touchdowns. To give you a picture of what Boise State usually averages in the run game for their touchdown numbers, they're looking usually between 25 and 30. That's what they usually average rushing touchdowns a year, only 15 last season. Their first 7 games were rough. 4 out of their first 7 games, they had 4 of them that were less than 80 yards rushing in 4 of their first 7 games. 2 of those were in the 20s, UCF and Nevada. Now, there was a lot of sack yards in the Nevada game that kind of skewed the numbers a little bit, and also in the UCF game, but less than 80 yards rushing in the 20s, not a good look for a Boise State running game. Now, second half of the season, Halani comes back. He's healthy, helps the team out a little bit. I think we get onto the 6th iteration of the offensive line. Some things start to click. 4 out of the 5 last games of the season, Boise State had over 160 yards per game in 4 out of those 5 last games there, including 239 yards versus New Mexico. Now, they had only 91 versus San Diego State, but there was a little bit of a game flow at the end where it kind of became more of a passing game that impacted that. And San Diego State's a good defense anyway. So definitely an improvement towards the end of the season, but definitely some struggles early on. And it never really got to where Boise State wanted to be, consistency throughout. We talk about some of the players that made an impact last season. First half of the season, Halani was limited on snap count, dealing with some lower leg injuries from that 2020 season. So the Oregon transfer, David Mikell, came in, 374 yards, 3.5 yard average, 2 touchdowns, no 100-yard games. He did, though, get 213 yards receiving. Van Buren, 218 yards, 3-yard average per carry, 9 total touchdowns, more than any Boise State player since 2018 in a single season for total touchdowns. But again, no 100-yard games, 28 yards receiving. Enter Halani, second half of the season, those numbers I was talking about earlier. He came in and had a really good last bit of the season. First 5 games on that limited snap count, only 170 yards total. Last 4 games, 399 yards, unrestricted play, 3 100-yard games, low 70 versus San Diego State, but he got a total of 569 yards, 4.8 yard average, and a touchdown, and also added 169 yards receiving and 12.1 yards per carry average. Now, that's a lot of stats. That's a lot of numbers thrown at you, but the main impression here is it wasn't Boise State's best running season. That's the main, you look at it overall, yes, some improvement towards the end there, but again, maybe that also had some weaker teams there that Boise State was playing that weren't necessarily the same top level early on, and then when they faced a top defense in San Diego State, again, a little bit of a falter there. So when you look at a team, when you see issues in the run game, who do you look to? I mean, again, it's going to be a lot of different factors that kind of dictate that. But who do you kind of look to as the main linchpin, the main point for that issue? Do you go to the offensive coordinator? Do you look at the offensive line issues? Do you look at the running backs? What's kind of your main focus that you build out from when you're looking at those kind of issues there in the running game?
Then one was health with Halani. Halani, obviously, he's the back. He's the main back. Now, there's no such thing as a bell cow anymore, but he was the main guy. And I think maybe with game planning in the beginning, I kind of threw a little wrench in the game when they didn't think they were going to have him as much. I think that is health. It has to be health. Now, it could be familiarity with Plow because he came in. We saw it in the UCF game. He came in. Their offense actually changed the next couple of weeks because he came in want to do like he did at Davis, that no huddle and try to run and gun and go fast. But it's hard to do that when you're going 3 and out because you leave your defense on the field. So you have to kind of change it up just a little bit. Unless you're having success, you can't go fast and go 3 and out. You can't do that. And so part of that it could be, with him just being familiar with the team coming in and Halani's health. And maybe we didn't see a whole lot of we did see the Oregon transfer, but maybe he didn't have an impact like they thought he was going to have. Because you don't want to lose. Well, ideally, if you want to win, you have to be able to run the ball. I'm not saying you have to run the ball 30 times, but you have to be a threat to run the ball. a defense has to respect your run game. And so, and that puts and if you can't run the ball, if you're not, it puts a lot of pressure on your O-line, put a lot of pressure on your quarterback. And so, with the O-line play, people were struggling or were getting upset about the O-line play. I was saying, hey, a lot of it could be Hank's holding the ball. A lot of it could be we can't run the ball. We have to help our O-line. You have the players you have, players you have. And so you have to be able to have a game plan that your players can run. And I'm saying that Plow didn't have that. It's a lot different. It's a lot different when you're practicing going full speed against a team and another player that's trying to beat you. And so they found out later on that here goes weaknesses that we have in the run game, and they fixed it. And then one of the weaknesses was get Kalani in there, help. And so when he came in, they ran better. They ran better. And so I would say the biggest thing was health. Just health.
Were you surprised? I mean, Cyrus Biblico, I thought I saw some good moments out of him. I thought he had maneuverability. Were you surprised that they maybe didn't lean on him more, especially early on when Kalani was injured? Were you surprised they didn't maybe make him a little bit more of that bell cow? Because you kind of saw a running scheme where you'd have Cyrus come in for one series and look okay, and then they take him out and put in Van Buren, and he'd be in for a series, and then they take him out and put in Kalani. And you just kind of saw this rotation where a running back never was able to get into the flow of the game. Were you surprised that they didn't kind of take one back and say, we're just going to go with him until it works kind of thing?
No, I wasn't surprised about that because Kalani was hurt, and so you can't afford to lose more running backs. So you have to spread out those carries. You have to spread out those carries. And to me, I saw him. He wasn't as an offense. You want a threat, like at least one homer and threat in the backfield, in my opinion. And he was a good runner, but he wasn't like a home run threat. And so he wasn't going, so he's going to get you 4 yards, but who's that guy that's going to break tackles and is going to threaten down the field? And so for them to spread it around, the carries around, I thought that was smart because he wasn't healthy. So you get him in when you can, and then you got to threaten the defense with different looks. One thing I wish they would have done more was use Green in the run game, and maybe they'll do that this year. When you have that quarterback that gives you an extra blocker when you're in the run game. And so when you have that kind of threat, he doesn't have to throw the ball. He's still a threat because he's a quarterback to throw the ball. But when you have that threat and with the RPOs and all that, you have an extra man to block. And you can hold the extra man. And so if your run game is struggling, maybe we should use him a little more. But I think Kalani's healthy. I'm not worried about that now. Andy's a defensive coach, and defensive coaches want to do what? They want to run the ball. And so he needs to be a threat to run the ball. You have to keep that clock going. You have to show that you're physical. And so I'm not too worried about the run game as long as Kalani's healthy.
We got some newcomers coming in for this Boise State running team. Of course, the headliner, especially coming out of the spring training, was the 3-star running back, Ashton Gentney, 5'9", 195 pounds. Got a lot of comparisons by some of the Boise State press to Doug Martin as far as the physique goes. Obviously, we don't have the proof yet, but as far as some of the physique goes there, Doug Martin, another guy who's 5'9", came in at about 200 pounds at Boise State. So he's a guy, Frisco, Texas. He had 2 Power 5 offers, Kansas and California. In his senior season there, was able to put up 31 total touchdowns in 2021. So this is a guy that can go out and score, also 1,843 yards rushing. He also put up 803 yards receiving and 10 touchdowns. Now, yes, those are high school numbers, and you kind of have to take that into effect. But regardless, this is a multi-threat back who can get you yards in the passing game, in the running game. We talked about some of those guys last season that had an impact. They're not going to be there anymore. I mean, Kalani's coming back. He's going to be your main guy. There's no running back controversy, obviously. But it's a question we're going to talk about later on. You don't have Biblico because he transferred out. He's actually going to be playing at Portland State. You don't have Van Buren is playing at Portland State. He transferred out. Then Biblico has gone to try his foot in the NFL. So you've got 2 guys that were your main backups. Now you start looking at maybe some new guys that could put some impact right off the bat. What do you think about Ashton Gentney here, a guy who put up some nice performances in the spring game? Do you think he's someone who can come in and perform right away and have an important role in this offense?
Yeah. I mean, coming as a freshman, but the biggest thing you said, when you said that his Power 5 conference, California. So Aristotle Thompson, AT, he was a running back here at Boise State. He's a running back coach at Cal. And he was one of like a mentor. He's a guy that took the younger guys under his wing. and he knows his stuff. He was at Cal Poly forever, and then Wilcox brought him to Cal a couple years ago. So he knows running backs. So the fact that AT will go out and try to get this kid should tell us something that this guy can play. And then he's coming in, and high school numbers are high school numbers, but you put them up. Now if it's something that nobody else can do, that means you're something special. And he put up some good. And all it is with him, he's coming in with good size, and he's going to come in confident and just coming in and learning how to play the sport of college football. That's all it's going to be. And then they have Keith there, Coach Keith. He's back here from Washington, and I know him pretty good. And Northern California, he was here before, and that guy knows what he's doing. He's put some backs from Washington in the NFL, and I know him personally. I know he motivates. I know he's going to demand a lot from these guys, and they're going to learn. So with him and then AT backing this kid, I got to think that the kid's good. I got to think that he's going to find the impact. If it's not this year, eventually he will. So I'm confident in him just from what we hear from him, what we see. We don't bring in, we're running back. We don't bring in the guys that aren't going to come in and have some kind of impact, not like that. And so the fact that he's coming in and he's going to have a shot because there's not too many people behind him. I mean, he's going to play, and I think he knows that. So it'll be a big summer for him, a big summer camp for him. And if he's progressing from that and learning how to play this college football, and then I think he'll be all right.
Well, I know you've got a couple other guys you've got an eye on here, people that you've worked with personally yourself, a couple of walk-ons here for Boise State. How about you talk about that real quick before we move into this 2022 preview?
Yeah, so, I remember Tyler Crawl when I coached high school here at Skyview, and he was an all-world guy. The fact that he came in last year and he had some good moments, especially at the end of the year. So, when you get that experience to play just a little bit, that you come into the offseason a little confident. So obviously he's been working and he's in the mix. Then we got a couple walk-on kids that are coming in. We got Ethan Makita from Eagle that I've known for a couple of years now. The kid, seen him last week. I see him weekly. The kid, he's coming off ACL that he did in the first game of high school last year, but this is how good he was. School still won him. And he actually, man, I saw how he's progressing his rehab. The kid looks good. He's put on some weight, strong, and he doesn't look like he looks better than he did before, to tell you the truth. And then we have Taylor Markham out of Timberline High that I've known since he was in 8th grade, known him and his family. The kid can run. He was a 10-7 guy in the 100. I actually got him to run track his junior year, and because he's a lacrosse player. And I said, man, you got to run track. As soon as he ran track, he ran 10-7. He called me. He had an offer from Montana State. He had offers, and all these schools wanted to talk to him. Because the kid's just a burner, and he had originally committed to Montana State, and he called me the night before. Him and his dad called me, and then he said that Boise State offered him just a walk-on spot, and so and we talked about it, and I've known him forever. I said, your dream was always to play at Boise State. Yeah, it's going to be hard, but that was your dream. That was your dream. And I told him those other schools still be there if it doesn't work. But you got at least, you're going to regret not trying to play at the school that you dreamed to play at. And that night he texted me and said that he's going to Boise State. And I can see him making some kind of impact because, Boise State's always good for walk-ons. Always good for walk-ons. We always hear about a walk-on earning scholarship or a walk-on making an impact, a walk-on playing. And he's going to be good, man, because the kid can run. He's tough. He can run. And he's just an athletic freak. And so I'm happy to see that him and Ethan, both of them were Boise State guys growing up, and they get the chance to go play on the blue and go play for the program. So I'm happy to see that, and I'm looking forward to watching them play.
Well, like you said, Boise State is a program where walk-on dreams come true. It is this program that, they don't go out and say, hey, what's your star number? They go out and say, what's your character? And they look and they build and they develop you, and they take these diamonds in the rough, these guys that maybe weren't having all the looks from everybody else, and they find those unique players that are able to come in and make a historic impact, and they're able to build and develop them. And like you talked about early on in that first question I had in the Q&A, Boise State's a great team for building character. So I'm excited to see what Boise State can do with these guys. That actually brings us right into the running back game preview here. So we'll just start off here with question number 1. So question number one is, who's that RB2, that running back 2 for Boise State? We've talked about it a little bit already, but Boise State's always been a team that has relied on that second back. But you start looking at this team, there's not a lot of experience there in that backup role. There's no Van Buren, there's no Biblicio. So you start looking at guys that on the team here. You got Ashton Genty, not experienced, but a lot of talent potential there. You've got Tyler Crow. We've already talked about him a little bit. Fans were really excited to see what he was able to do last season. A guy who can maybe kind of fill into that role for that Van Buren, that short yardage, kind of big time, going at the end zone kind of back. A little bit of a smaller guy. Van Buren was 6 foot, 240. Tyler Crow's 5'11", 220. But I think he has a little bit more speed, a little bit more maneuverability that he's able to use to compensate. And he is a guy, we talk about that blue collar work ethic. He fights for every single inch, and it doesn't matter. I mean, he's playing in the fourth quarter, game's already in hand, and he is still out there running his heart off trying to get that first down. And you see that effort coming in. You give him a little bit more of a meaningful snaps. I think we might see an improvement in those numbers. But 108 yards, 5.1 yard average, a touchdown last season. To Quinn Tyler, 47 yards rushing, but he has some good speed there. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Devin Demas. I'm not saying he's as fast as Devin Demas was, but give him some speed on the outside. He's able to make some moves. And then Danny Smith, just kind of rounding out the running backs on the roster. Redshirt senior, only 17 yards carries. Probably not going to be a major contributor next season, but a guy that Boise State can go to if they need to kind of get a little bit more experience there in the backfield. So you look at this list: Ashton Genty, Daquan Tyler, Tyler Crow, and Danny Smith. Who do you kind of see as maybe being that number 2 change of pace running back for Boise State this season?
Well, right now it looks like Gentry or Crow. I would probably say Crow because last year he actually had some experience and played, and like you said, he's kind of different from Alani. But as far as I can see right now, it's probably going to be one of them. But I would not be surprised. By title they'll be number 2, but I won't be surprised if they use Green in the run game. And maybe Green beats that change of pace guy. Maybe he's coming in doing those RPOs. So that won't surprise me at all. You know, we have a history of Boise State, man. We run those fly sweeps. That was part of the run game. Remember my first year, we were running option. Bart Hendricks was running option. So, you know, we just got to get a run game going. It doesn't have to be a running back. It just has to be a threat of some kind of run. And it could be Green, it could be Gentry, it could be Crows, it could be one of them. It could be a receiver. You know, remember McNichols came in as a receiver. And so it could be one of those guys, but if number 2 right now, you know, going into camp is probably going to be Genty or Crow.
Now, I've talked with a couple of the Boise State media guys. We had Ron Counts on the channel earlier this season, also BJ Rains, and we're kind of talking about some of these guys. Tyler Crow and a little bit about Ashton Genty. And there was a little bit of concern there with the fact that Genty's just not very tested yet. And Tyler Crow played a lot against the backups, so we don't really know what his true potential is. And I was a little more high on them than I think they were a little bit. I was saying, hey, I really think that I liked what I saw of Tyler Crow. I don't think he's going to be too much of a step down from Van Buren. And especially Ron was kind of saying, hey, I'm not sure about that. Maybe cool the Jets a little bit. I think we'll probably see a little bit of a step back in the backup role for the Boise State this season. Do you expect to see a little bit of a back step for Boise State in that kind of backup role? Or do you think that these guys can come in at the same level as Biblicio and Van Buren and keep this thing going?
So, but here goes the thing about like high school and college football. You know, the kids change every 4 years. So somebody has to step up. So we might not have seen them just because we had other guys there. But, you know, those guys in practice, they see these guys make plays. They see that they can play. It's just the opportunity. And so for us to be upset when we lose a player, I don't get upset. We lose players every 4 years. They're gone. And so I feel confident. I know these coaches aren't going to put a player out there that's not ready to play. You know, and a lot of times you weed yourself out too as players. So you figure out like maybe this isn't for me. So for the fact that they're there and they'll go through camp and they'll have an opportunity, they'll take advantage of it. Is it going to start off all rosy? Probably not. But it takes experience. You know, it takes experience. It takes some confidence in playing, and it takes your teammates too to let you know that you can play at this level. So I don't see it being that much of a backdrop because it's not like we had a 1,000-yard rusher last year. Not like we had, you know, killers in the backfield last year. You know, so I don't see it being a drop off. I see them as they know these players. These coaches know these players, and they know what they can do to make sure that they put them in position to be successful when they run the ball. So I'm confident in the run game because Andy knows he's a defensive guy. You got to at least be able to run the ball. You got to be a threat to run the ball to have success. And I see us having some success this year.
Well, the good news is there might be some inexperience there in the running game, but the offensive line now, hold with me, guys, watching the video. I know offensive line is a big question mark, but there was a lot of experience on this offensive line. They returned every single starter from last season, 5 redshirt seniors, 2 sixth-year players for Boise State here. They also have some new guys coming in that are definitely going to be a talent infusion. You got redshirt freshman Mason Randall, who I looked great out of high school last year. Didn't get to play last season, but he's a big guy, 6'4", 310 pounds, who might be able to come in. And I think there was a lot of talk about him looking good there on the practice squad last season. And they got a transfer from Washington State, Cade Bareford, coming in, 6'7", 370 pounds. There's a couple other transfers out there that the war is a little murky on whether or not they're actually coming to Boise State, so I won't touch on them. But Boise State does bring a lot of experience here. It's an offensive line that showed improvement last season once they kind of figured out what iteration of, you line up here, you line up there. They went through about 6 of those before they kind of found out what worked. But we did see improvement last season. Do you think that this offensive line is going to take a step forward this year? Like I said, they've returned every starter, but they returned every starter last season, and it was still bad. Do you think we're going to see kind of another messy first half of the season, or do you think they'll kind of get on it a little bit quicker this year?
No, I see improvement because we know they need to improve. And so this offseason was geared to improving the O-line. Now, me personally, there were bad moments, but it's also not always on the O-line. When I coach running backs, I said it's our job to make our O-line look good. So everybody has to do their job. And so for running back, you have to make sure that your O-line looks good. Sometimes you may have to chip when you go out. Sometimes you might have to be a little more patient. Sometimes you might have to go. So you got to fill your O-line out and have a relationship with your O-line. In the pass game too. I mean, with the pass game, like I said, you got to at least have be a threat to run the ball, in my opinion, to help out the pass game. So play actions, what's going to lead to big plays. Play actions, what's going to hold these corners, going to hold these linebackers and hold these DNs from rushing hard. Screen game, and so we can help our O-line out a lot from just being able to run the ball or being a threat in the backfield. And so I'm not going to put it all on the O-line. Now, obviously, with technique and all that stuff, that's what the O-line coach will work on. He'll be able to tell on that. But as running backs and receivers, we have to do our job too to help the O-line, so they don't get exposed. It's hard. It's hard to go 60, 70 plays against a big man in front of you and try to you're going to lose some. Corners going to a receiver, and so we have to do our part to limit that stuff. And Hank has to go out there, get rid of the ball a little faster. Sometimes Dinwiddie. One of the biggest issues my freshman year was pass blocking. When Pete came in and me and Dinwiddie would talk, and if there was a blitzer coming, a linebacker, and I would tell him, like, if he knew I wasn't going to be able to block the dude or I was going to have issues, he'd be like, just cut him and get rid of the ball. So I'll cut him and he'll get rid of the ball. And so they have to start building that relationship to help the O-line. And sometimes, the O-line got to step up. They have to do it. They have to do it. They have to take ownership. Like, this guy's not going to beat me, and they'll fix it. I'm sure it was a priority this year to fix that part of the game because they saw what happened. But it wasn't the only issue with the O-line. It wasn't all their fault. I mean, the running backs can do a lot better too, and the receivers and quarterback can do a lot better.
Well, having a healthy Helani is going to go a big way to fixing a lot of the issues. Having a second year in Tim Plow's offense where these guys are actually on a little bit more on the same page, you're kind of coming in with a new system last year, that's going to help. And again, you've got an offensive line. Yeah, they haven't had a great 4 or 5 years so far for Boise State, but all of them decided they had opportunities to leave. I mean, they have their degrees already. They have future plans that they're looking ahead to. They could be gone, but they said, no, we're going to come back. We expect better of ourselves. This team deserves better from us, and we're going to come back and put a better performance on to leave our legacies at a high point for Boise State. So the work ethics out there, the character is there, and I think you got this coaching staff. If anybody can capitalize on it, it's this coaching staff. So while I'm not necessarily entirely sold that we're going to have a great O-line year this year, I think it is going to be better. I think it's going to take a step forward. I'm excited to see what can happen with this coaching staff and with a healthy Helani in the backfield as well. We start talking about healthy Helani in the backfield and an improvement in the offensive line. Can Helani get Boise back on their 1,000-yard streak? They've had 14 straight years from 2006 to 2019 where they had a running back go for over 1,000 yards. There's the longest active streak in the nation. And then 2020 happened. we didn't get there. Holani was injured, limited games. Everyone said, okay, that's a throw-up year. Just toss it out. It's fine. If the record comes back in 2021, we'll be fine. Well, 2021 didn't happen. Holani, he'd been healthy all year. We might have been able to get there, but we weren't able to get there last season. Holani is the last back to go for 1,000 yards in his freshman season for Boise State, 1,014 yards. Can he get back into that? Do you think we're going to get a 1,000-yard back this year?
Oh, absolutely. He's already done it. Yeah, he just has to stay healthy. Absolutely. I think that we can get back on that 1,000-yard. I think it'll be a priority to do that. Like I said, man, as a running back, that running game has to be a threat. And in order for it to be a threat, he needs to run the ball. And he needs to get to close. He needs to run the ball, and it can't be for 60. It can't be for 70. He has to start hitting that 100-yard mark. And so I 100% believe that he'll get to 1,000 this year. We'll have a 1,000-yard rusher.
Now, he's coming back from that lower body injury. He looked really good there towards the end of the season. How does that injury impact you when you had that and you're does it change how you play? Is it something that you can kind of overcome with enough training, or is it kind of something that's always in the back of your mind there when you're about to take a hit?
Oh, yeah. I messed up my knee my junior year, so I ended up getting 1,000 my senior year. So, yeah, you're 100%. You can get better. And then the fact that he came back last year and he was able to play on that, and he got confident. It's about confidence in your leg. And so he has a whole year. And usually it's a year until you feel 100%, until you feel comfortable on it. And he's past that, and he's played on it. And so, he'll be fine. He's not worried about it. I'm sure he's not worried about it.
Well, moving on here with the discussion, talking about that Holani maybe getting 1,000 yards, offensive line improving. One of the factors that might be helping Holani get to that 1,000-yard mark this season and improve the running back game overall, you've already mentioned it, is the return of Keith Bonifant for this Boise State team. Coaching the running game. He's the Boise State running back coach from 2009 to 2013. He had 5,000-yard rushers during that time. Some big names, Doug Martin, Jay Ajayi, all those guys coming through while he was there for Boise State. And then during Washington running back coach 2014 to 2019, you had Myles Gaskin, big name, broke out a bunch of records for Washington. He's had 1,000-yard rusher 10 out of the 13 seasons that he has been coaching the running game. What kind of impact does a guy like Keith coming back to the program have for Boise State?
Oh, huge. Number one, he's going to be a great recruiter. Keith can go into any living room and talk to anybody. That's the kind of person he is. He has a great personality, and he's going to be able to relate to these guys. And that's how he gets these guys to play hard. He's going to be able to relate to them, and he sees their goals and be able to play on their goals and motivate them. And it's proofs in the pudding. All he has to say is, look at my resume. I'm running backs going to the NFL. Look at my resume. Backs playing at college football. So he knows what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about. And that's going to give those guys confidence to run the ball. It's going to give them confidence in Keith to believe what he's saying and to trust that he's in their best interest to help them have success on the field.
Well, this is something that gets brought up all the time, that talent versus coaching discussion. How much of an impact do you think a coach has on the success of a player? Or do you think it's a little bit more of that just kind of imbued natural talent that players bring to the table?
Oh, you need both. And so we've all, if you played sports, you always seen these guys that had so much talent. And at some point, they didn't live up to his potential because they didn't have the guidance. And that's all the coach is. A coach is there to help you guide, to help you get to the peak and get to wherever you're trying to go to. And so in order, you could be the fastest guy, the strongest guy, but you don't know everything. And that's what the coaches are there. They're there to make sure that you do know what you need to work on. You do know what you're not doing right. That you do know where you need to be. And you need both. You need coaching.
Well, Boise State has always had those great coaches that are able to bring up the running game, to be able to emphasize the running game. And we talked about this Boise State team. We talked about already about Tim Plow needing to emphasize the running game. And it's a priority item. It's something they didn't get to where they wanted to last season. And we're talking about it going into this season. Now, Tim Plow, a guy who is a little bit more of an air raid guy. I know that he wants to bring that balanced attack, but you look at his career at UC Davis. I was talking about Boise State having bad numbers, that 124-yard mark, but it wasn't too far from some of the seasons he had. His first year at UC Davis, 136-yard average per game. His third season at UC Davis, 123. Now, he had some good numbers in there as well, 226 his last season. But the passing game was always the focus. Over 300 yards passing, which is great. But that running game wasn't necessarily always the thing that he was focusing on. Can he bring that balanced attack to Boise State? And how is he going to be able to fit that in with also emphasizing the passing game? He's got a great quarterback out there, an experienced quarterback. He's a guy that wants to throw the ball. How does he flip the switch a little bit to say, all right, we got to focus on the running game and make sure that's a priority, as well as saying, okay, passing game's got to improve as well. I mean, how does he tread the needle there between being that pass-heavy guy and becoming a little bit more of a balanced attack, which he wants to for Boise State this season?
I mean, he doesn't have to be balanced. I mean, he can be pass-heavy, but you just have to be a threat. You have to be able to run the ball. That's it. You have to be a threat to run the ball. It doesn't mean that you have to run the ball 20, 30 times a game, but when you do run the ball, you got to have success to make sure that you keep that defense balanced, to keep that defense guessing. And so you can throw the ball a bunch, but you got to be able to run the ball. And then also when to end games, that's how you end the game. You end the game running the ball. No matter who you are, you could throw the ball. You could be this pass-happy team, but at the end of the game, you're not going to throw the ball because it's going to stop the clock. You got to be able to run the ball. And so he doesn't have to be balanced 50-50. He just has to be able to – Boise State has to be a threat to run the ball. There has to be a threat for the defense.
Well, we talk about running backs getting stronger as the game goes on, and that happens a lot of times because they're taking those reps. The offensive line is wearing down the defensive line, and they're starting to figure out the game. They're getting into the flow of the rhythm. They're knowing where those holes are going to be opening up, and it happens from being able to play throughout the whole game. Do you think running backs are hurt by some of these pass-heavy offenses where they aren't in the game throughout the whole, not getting all those carries? Do you think that hurts their ability to take over the game in the back half?
No, I don't think so. I mean, most teams are still going to run the ball close to 20 times, no matter what, if it's one guy or a couple guys. But you just have to take advantage of your carries. My first couple years there, I wasn't the guy. And so I would come in and I made a point that I got to take advantage of every carry I get. I might not get another one. So just take advantage of the carries that you do get. And as a running back, you can change the offense. Know how you change the offense? Have success running the ball. If you're running the ball hard and you're getting yards, the coach has to run the ball. He has to give you the ball. In the pass game, he has to give you the ball. So if you're a threat to run the ball and you're a big play guy, you can change the offense by the way you play. And so if it's catching the ball out the backfield or if it's running the ball, you have to be a threat as a running back. So you can't let a pass-happy offense dictate how you play. Just take advantage of when you get the ball, and then you can change the minds of the offense coordinator. You can change the minds of the offense by the way you carry the ball and by the way you do what you do with the ball in your hand.
Now, we're talking about changing how our coordinator calls the running game. That is actually a question for Tim Plow here is, you look at last season, he had so many different games where he called the running game completely differently. And it wasn't always because the running backs were finding success. It just seemed like he was trying to try the water with different techniques. You love the Utah State game, a ton of quarterback scrambles. Didn't happen the rest of the season. Hank Bachmeier had almost every single one of his runs in the Utah State game. You talk about the Colorado State game. We were wide receivers. Phil Shakir was taking snaps under center or in the backfield for the running backs and then running the ball. We had all these sweeps going on, and it wasn't really an emphasis item the rest of the time. Fresno State was a little bit more of a big balanced attack. UCF, we tried to just run and didn't have success. Air Force trying to just push in at the goal line 4 times in a row, don't make success there. There was so much inconsistency throughout the way that the running game was called last season. When you saw that, what was your impression of that? If you, as a running back, trying to explain to some of the fans that saw that and were frustrated, what is your impression of that? What do you think Tim Plow was trying to do? Will we see more of that this season?
Well, people got to remember, you're playing against another team. And so if their team has a strength, if there's strengths on the inside, why would you run to their strength? And so I think it's more like game planning. With the Shakir thing, one thing that kind of bothered me at the beginning of the year, that he wasn't touching the ball early. And I'm one of those guys, kind of like basketball. I want my best player having the ball in their hands early. And so there'll be where he's only had like one target in the first half. And so I think that was probably a way putting him in the backfield, getting the ball in his hand was a way to get him going more. You got to give your best player the ball. But with their game plan is the game plan because you're game planning against another team. So if you can't run inside, if you don't feel like you run inside, you can't run inside. And so I don't look at it so much as like, oh, we were doing this week, why aren't we doing it again? No, I look at it as like, well, maybe that's their strength. Maybe we got to be smart about this. Don't run into a wall. Don't keep running into a wall, being your head against the wall, trying to do something that you feel comfortable doing. No, we have to game plan and we have to try to play to their weakness. That's how I look at it.
Well, do you think that Tim Plow, when you look at his play calling, you look at the style, there was a lot of creativity in the passing game. I thought there was a lot of, it wasn't consistent always, but there was a lot of creative play calling, a lot of shifts, getting the tight ends more involved. I love seeing that back. It's always been Boise State's roots to go to the tight ends. Kind of went away from it. but those are back in the game now. Getting different wide receivers involved in the passing game. The running game, it seemed to be almost an afterthought. There didn't seem to be as much creativity. It kind of seemed to be like, all right, take the ball up the middle and see what you can get a lot of the times. Not so many outside runs, not a lot of, counters and extensions to the outside. Did you get that impression from Tim Plow that he was kind of taking the passing game as his primary and the running game was a little bit more of an afterthought for him? Or do you think that it was just kind of, like you said, going against different teams, you go with what works and maybe this next season will be different?
I don't know him personally, but what I know, I have some friends coach at UC Davis, he wants to throw the ball. And so when you get a coordinator that wants to do that, they want to throw the ball. But one thing that we're missing now that is Keith being here. Keith come help with the run game. I think he's the assistant head coach now. He might be the run game coordinator. So he could bring that part of the game to our program. And so, that's why I can see us being better running the ball. And he's probably learning. We're all these coaches are learning. They're still learning. And so this might be something new to him with these gap runs. And so maybe that's something we might see. He just wasn't familiar with it or wasn't comfortable with it last year. When you get a team that throws the ball a lot, there's a lot of zone running, there's a lot of zone RPOs. It's not a lot of gap runs or counters and all that. And so maybe bringing Keith in now, that's something that would be bigger in the run game.
I'm 100% with you on that. I think bringing Keith back in was an incredible move by Andy Avalos. You're right. He is the associate head coach here for Boise State now and primary run game coordinator. So I think that is going to be a major impact. Tim Plow, super smart guy. I have a lot of respect for him. I know Ryan Dinwiddie does as well. Super smart guy, but I think that maybe the running game, not a blind spot for him, but maybe not the biggest emphasis as a former quarterback and as a passing guy. He's, going for that passing game. So I'm excited to see what Keith can do for Boise State. We're talking about some of those issues, though, that need to be fixed and finding creative ways to solve them. Red zone issues. That was a big point of emphasis for that world should be a point of emphasis for Boise State coming into this season. So out of their 49 trips to the red zone, only 29 of them ended in touchdowns. Only 60% ending in scores in touchdowns. A low number of actual rushing touchdowns. Like we talked about, lowest since 1997, only 15 rushing touchdowns. Not a lot of rushing touchdowns for Boise State, and a lot of that impacted their red zone issues. I mean, we all remember the Air Force game where we couldn't put it in there at the goal line. How does Boise State fix their red zone issues? I know you've already mentioned Green and maybe bring him in the RPO. We've talked about some of this creativity that we've seen from Tim Plow, and maybe Keith coming in can adjust the game plan a little bit. When you look at those red zone issues for Boise State, what do you think is the number one way we go towards solving them?
Oh, running the ball. When you're, like I said, I keep saying it, threat to run the ball. When you get to that red zone, you got to be at least a threat to run the ball, either by pounding it in, 20 yards, or play action. Think about how many touchdowns you see in the NFL. How many touchdowns will you see a guy wide open from play action? And so be able to run the ball, being threat to run the ball. And then we got some bigger, tight ends always great in the goal line, but we got some big receivers too. With Austin Bolt's a big, fast dude, and I can't remember the other guys. So just being more physical, running the ball, being a threat to run the ball, being physical in that goal line, and it's a mindset because that shortens the field. It's a little field now. And so it's you and another man. So it's that mindset of being tough, and I'm gonna beat this guy. I'm gonna out physical this guy, and we get in the end zone. So I think it's always gonna come back to the run game. But being a threat to run the ball on the goal line is the number one thing when you get down there if you want to score.
Well, I'm excited for this season, especially when we talk about these red zone issues, because I think Taylor Green is going to be a guy that they can bring in some of those red short yardage packages. It's something I talked about with Ryan did when we did the quarterback preview. I think that's a perfect spot for him. He's got the legs, and I mean, maybe people don't know this, but he's got a good arm too. So when he gets out there, they're not necessarily just going to run the ball every time if they can get him in those package situations. He's got a good, accurate arm that he can get the ball out as well. Hank Bachmeier coming into his senior year, when you talk about playing time overall, it's really his junior season, total playing time, cumulative playing time. So he's going to be a little bit better. Offensive line's improving, but a guy that I think can make a major impact in the red zone for Boise State is going to be Tyler Crow. When you look at a guy that Boise State doesn't actually, you look at their roster, they don't have a fullback listed on their roster, not a single one, which is, I don't know, that maybe that's just the way college football is moving. For me, that's weird. I was used to seeing that big fullback. I know you guys had an amazing fullback there and out there in your 2003 season, but For me, it's just weird not seeing that fullback, but they did use Tyler Crow in that fullback type role last season a few times. I think you get a guy who's had a little more experience during the game, heating up. I think he can be a major goal line factor for Boise State in that fullback role. And like you just said, a little more creativity, bringing in Keith. I think we're going to see an improvement in this red zone for Boise State. We've got to. 60% is not the number you want to shoot for, but I think it starts with bringing a little bit more creativity, making that running game not a secondary factor, not an afterthought, making it a primary focus like you're talking about. Not the whole game, but there are certain times in the game where the running game has to become the primary focus. Short yardage and red zone. That's where you've got to lean on the running game. So if we can make that a primary focus for Boise State, again, I think bringing in Keith, healthy Kalani, better offensive line, and then some key players here like Tyler Crow, who I think can make an impact. I think we're going to see a definite improvement here for Boise State. Well, that wraps up our discussion of that 2022 season. We're going to go here with some quick keys to the season for this Boise State running game, and then we'll go through some predictions, and then that will be the video. So let's just push right here into the keys of the season for the Boise State running game. So the number one key for Boise State, and I think this goes for all of it, you kind of touched on it already, but I think it's going to be a little bit more creativity in the running game. Pushing the boundary, we need to keep the defenders guessing, because you just run the same play over and over again, running it up the middle, which we saw so many times last season. You can't go away entirely from that. You got to have some runs up the middle, but getting the wide receivers, you mentioned that already, getting the wide receivers involved in the running game, I think that's going to be huge. Bringing in the quarterback in the running game, that's going to be a major factor for Boise State. Shift, misdirections, whatever you got to do. We didn't see like any pitches at all last season. So getting Boise State running game, pushing them to the boundary. You've got to have a little more creativity. I think Keith is going to be a big part of that for this Boise State game, but it's got to be bring that creativity from the passing game, bring it into the running game, make it a full factor. I think Boise State really needs to bring a little more creativity this year for their running game compared to what we saw last season.
Yeah, I mean, I would even go before that. Health. If Kalani stays healthy, that's one thing that's going to help the run game. And just taking the initiative and being committed to the run game when you get into these short yardages and the goal line, being committed to it. I mean, if you and taking advantage of your what advantages you have. So if you can pound a guy down the middle, we've done it before. We ran inside zone maybe 4 plays in a row until you stop it. So you got to prove to me you can stop it. So it's a mindset of being physical. I'm gonna run the ball downhill, or in being creativity, misdirection. So a lot of it, you knocked it all out there. It's just so all that comes down to being more committed to the run game.
Right. Being more committed. And like I said, with that creativity piece, bringing the wide receivers into it, which is going to be my key too. I know it's a little bit of a subset of being that more creative, but we've got some great wide receivers out there. Yeah, there's maybe a little bit of a lack of backup experience there for Boise State. Kalani, great number one running back, but you start looking at those number twos, not as much experience. We've got some great wide receivers who, again, though they're inexperienced, they've got some great speed. And a great way to supplement that running game, to bring in those misdirections, to keep the defense guessing. They never know when a wide receiver rolls into the backfield, whether or not they're going to be taking that ball or if they're going to be going out for a pass, is getting those wide receivers in the running game. We saw a little bit of it last season. Khalil Shakir had over, I think it was 140 yards rushing. I'd have to look that up again. But Khalil Shakir, he had a good season running the ball for Boise State. And then we saw some other guys come in and do it. But Boise State's got some fast, young wide receivers who, while they may not necessarily have the full game awareness yet, that's going to be maybe a question mark for this Boise State team. It's something we'll definitely dig more into when I do the wide receiver tight end preview. But while that might be some questions in their ability to go out there and run the offense as far as going through and making those routes, they can run. That's the best part of being a wide receiver. Just go out there and use your speed. And getting a little bit of confidence, getting a carry in the backfield, and you get 10-yard, maybe more gain on that. That builds confidence for you. You go out there with a little bit more chip on your shoulder and make that big pass play the next snap. So I think Boise State work the wide receivers into the running game, substitute for a little bit of lack of experience in the change of pace back. I'm not saying the wide receivers are going to be our change of pace backs, but as well as mixing in with that creativity in the running game, make up for that little bit of a lack of experience at the second string level. I think it's going to be a real impactor for Boise State. And again, Tim Plow loves to work with wide receivers. This is a great way to put that into the running game.
And on top of that, too, Austin Bolt and Ben Ford, they were quarterbacks in high school, but they ran the ball a lot. And so they weren't throwing quarterbacks. Like, they were more like option quarterbacks. And so the fact that, and they got speed, we know they got speed. And the fact that they were able to have the ball in their hands all the time when they were in high school and actually run the ball and rush the ball, that gives them more versatility on offense.
Well, absolutely. Like you said, we've got the wide receivers. You mentioned it already. I'm glad that we're on the same page here with this second key. Moving into the third key, maybe a little bit of a different take on this. I know just from our previous discussion about Tim Plow's run with the offense, but my third key for this is going to be know when enough is enough. I mean, there's going out there and there's trying to establish the run game. But when you're in your third series in the third quarter and it's still not being able to run the ball, and specifically speaking about that UCF game, and you still cannot establish the run, go do something different. I'm not saying that you've got to go completely away from the running game, but Tim Plow, he gets a little stubborn, I think. You see that he's like, we got to make this work. We're going to prove it 4 times in a row, basically the same play against Air Force at the red zone. We're just going to prove we're bigger than you and push in the red zone and push into the end zone, and it didn't happen. Yeah, there's trying to prove that you can do something that's working for next week, but you got to focus on winning the game right now. And I think he's got to get a little bit off that one track that sometimes he can get onto. He's going to know when enough is enough, time to start putting something else out. Maybe we throw the ball the next couple of series before we come back to the running game. I'm not saying that Boise State goes away from it if it's not working, but you got to know when enough is enough.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree with that. But also, man, I can see as a play caller, you see one mistake, you run a play, you make one mistake, say, if we make that block, we're in. Or it could be another. So I can see him saying that too. It's like, oh man, we make that block, we're in, and then you're going back to it. But yeah, bottom line, you got to get in the end zone. So you get in there, you get down there, you have to capitalize when you get down to the red zone, because it's so a little number of opportunities to get down there. And so just making sure that you have a number of plays for goal line that you can go back to, that you feel comfortable with. A lot of times too is the players too. When you go through those goal line practices and goal line days, make sure that you're comfortable, you know what to do, because you only got so many shots at it down at the end zone. And so just make sure you're confident and you stay committed to what you do and believe in what you do.
Well, those are the 3 keys for Boise State. More creativity in the running game, getting in those trick plays. We saw very few trick plays for Boise State last season. There's some great, we usually think about the passing game when it comes to trick plays. Boise State's got a couple of really good running trick plays as well. We usually run the Statue of Liberty at least once a season, so I'd like to see that come back. But a little more creativity in the running game overall, a little more pushing the boundary. Continue to work the wide receivers into the running game, going to those non-running type players, quarterbacks, wide receivers. Throw a tight end in at fullback. You've got some big, tall guys. Whatever it takes to get something different out there to start finding success and start getting in the groove there for the running game. And then know when enough is enough. Hey, we've tried this. It didn't work. We got to move on, or we're going to get into a little bit of a grind here and end up kind of sucking away from our momentum here for the Boise State, for the offense overall. So I think we saw improvement in really all of these areas over last season, but we got to come into the ground running. We've got a big game against Oregon State. We got a big opportunity. We're going to be in prime time. Big opportunity for Boise State to come in here and prove what they got out the bat. We've got to hit the ground running. I think going into our prediction section here, I think we've got a good thing to look forward to. So let's get into the prediction section here for Boise State. I think first off, Helani is going to break 1,200 yards if he stays healthy. I think if he can stay healthy, I'd put down there more if Tim Plow wasn't the offensive coordinator, because I think the passing game is going to be a little bit more of an emphasis. But I think the running game is still going to be an important factor. I think Helani is going to have a good season, 1,200 yards rushing plus. I think the offensive line is going to show improvement in the run blocking specifically. We talked about it with Ryan Dinwiddie. I wasn't so sure how much they'd be improving in the passing block, but I think the run game, they showed improvement towards the end of last season, dramatic improvement. I think they capitalized on that this year. Coming strong, not going to say they're going to be the best offensive line in the conference, but I think they're not going to be the worst like they were close to being last season at points. I think Plow's desire to prove he wants a balanced offense leads to some frustrating UCF-esque moments early in the season where he says, we've got to establish the run, we've got to do it. It's not working, but he keeps going into it. And I think he'll find his groove, though. I think he'll find the right balance, but I think it's going to take a little while. I'm not saying that we're going to end up losing a bunch of games like we did last season. I'll save my prediction on that until I get into the schedule preview, which will be my last video in the series. But I think that fans are going to be a little frustrated early on with maybe the way that Tim Plow is calling this, because he wants to prove and establish the play call, because he's not just calling the game for this season. He's trying to establish something for Boise State for ages to come here. He's trying to establish something with Boise State that can find success every season. So I think there'll be a little bit of frustration, but fans, if you can stick with him, keep giving him the support he needs, he's going to find it. He's going to get that because he's a smart guy. He's going to lean on the guys around him. He's going to find that groove. And then I think a wide receiver will break 150 yards rushing. And I think that Boise State improves dramatically in the red zone with Halani in the passing game and Crow and Green and a bunch of other creative options there for Boise State to be able to use down there in the running game in the red zone. So that's my overall predictions. Like I said, I'm not going to put a record prediction in for this one, so I'll save that for the end. But if you want to throw one in here at the end or any other season predictions you've got, go ahead here, David.
No, I just see a better year. I see Andy having been here in year 2. I'm not going to put a number on it, but we'll see an improvement. We'll be happy with the products on the field, and he has his full year in here, and he's starting to get some of his guys in here. So I see success this year.
Well, I'm excited. This is going to be a very interesting season for Boise State. Much easier schedule. I didn't even go into the numbers specifically, but there are some opportunities in the run game for Boise State this season. 6 of the teams that they're going to be playing all averaged over or close to or over 150 yards given up in the run game last season per game. So so for instance, the biggest one here is New Mexico gave up 189 yards rushing, and the lowest number there is UT Martin gave up 148.5 yards per game rushing. Now there are some games that are going to be close. San Diego State, Air Force teams that are good against the run only gave up 80 yards for San Diego State there, but Oregon State over 144 yards per game given up on the ground. Wyoming 182 yards on the game. Fresno State 125 yards per game. So there's going to be some opportunities in the run game. It's a weaker schedule. Their offensive line is going to be showing improvements. We've got some great coaches coming in here that are going to be showing improvement as well. And of course, healthy Halani back. I'm excited for this season. I'm excited to see what we can do. Thank you so much for being on here today, David. This was a great discussion. I thought it was a great preview of this 2022 team, and I can't wait to see what happens with this Boise State team.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, man. Anytime you want me on, I'm on.
Absolutely. Well, this was a great discussion. Thank you, everyone, for coming on today. Make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more of the videos in this series preview. I'm going to have the videos that I've previously done. I put them into a playlist for you. Nice to come back. Going to be in the description part of this video. Make sure you go and find that if you haven't already watched the front 7 preview and the passing game preview there with Carl Keever and Ryan Dinwiddie. So thank you so much for watching. This was a fantastic video. I had a blast. And as always, go Big Blue!